action. Hello, welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billy and I'm your host. This is an almost weekly podcast about vintage knitting. And you know, when I started this in August of 2020, my intention was to really bring knitting together with accessories, particularly vintage accessories, like the Art Deco earrings that I'm wearing. So in my last episode, I showed this handbag, and we'll talk about it in just a bit. But I wanted to get back a little bit more to that in this episode. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram at Billy Toy, and I'll put that somewhere on the screen. My background is a little busy this time. I wanted to give you a different perspective. That's Manhattan, high-rise apartment building across the street from me. I'm also in a high-rise. I'm on the 9th floor. So for them looking at me, it's probably looking about the same. If these windows look unusual to you, it's because they're what's called lot line windows. They have metal lines running through them because there's a very short building just below us that if a fire were to break out, this is New York City law, these windows have to be fire rated so that the fire wouldn't penetrate our building or blow out the windows. So special windows that you might not see if you don't live in a big city like New York. But I wanted to show you, just in the way that Craig Ferguson does, I wanted to show you my finished object, which was my Jeannie, the Fair Isle that I did as a knit along with a few other people. Now, if you know Craig Ferguson, you know that he sometimes goes like, he shows something really fast that he doesn't really mean for you to see. And the reason that I did it like that is I will have another program exclusively devoted to Jeannie and the knit along. The other knitters who were knitting with me one of them has finished her project. Another one finished it before we even started, and she's been participating with us. And the fourth person, including myself, is finishing up her steeks and doing the ribbing around the armholes and the neckline. So pretty soon I should be able to bring you that episode. So be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, I just wanted you to know I do have a finished object. Now, let's talk about what I would have done as my next project if this collaboration hadn't come up. And I also wanted to just describe once again, I know I've talked about it before, why I don't do stash. This is a perfect case in point. Life happens, and sometimes things don't go as planned. I had planned, and if you look in my Ravelry account, in my queue, you'll see a project that I was hoping to start. It's called For the Rink or the Links. And it's I believe it's it's either the 1930s or 1940s pattern that is a little bit complicated. And along I did before Jeannie was a lace pattern, which was a little bit advanced, a little bit tedious, a lot of pattern all over. And then of course, Jeannie, Fair Isle all over, took me, 18 weeks, 4.5 months. So I wasn't sure that I would be able to get enough people to do a knit along with me if I tackled something that's as complicated. It's not that it's so complicated, but it does involve 3 colors. So fortunately for me, because I'm not a stash person, I had not yet purchased the yarn for that project. And that's been my practice. I don't buy yarn until I'm really ready to go. So as you'll see, I just got the yarn for what will be my collaboration project. And I've only just begun to knit that. So suffice it to say, I did not purchase yarn for the Links and Rink beautiful sweater. I will do that sometime in the future, but I have purchased the yarn for Harlequin.
So I am very, very excited to share with you. I just received my package from Quince Co, and I wanted to show you how it's eco-enclosed, 100% recycled poly mailer, which I very much appreciate. There's some information on their website, which I'll have to tell you later about their yarns, and I think they're rather eco-friendly. So I don't know if you can see me using Mother's vintage scissors to slice this open. And momentarily, you and I will see for the first time the colors I have chosen. What's inside here? A little postcard. Thanks for shopping with us, blah, blah. Okay. Ta-da! So far that looks good. I like it. It's a lot of green so far. And now for the contrasting colors. Woo! I think they are fantastic. One more of those. Okay, that's it. So I've got 2 and 2 of those, and there should be 7 of the greens, and that's it. So again, it's Quince Co, Finch, 100% American wool. The colors are Glacier, Peacock, and Hunter. And this is grown, spun, dyed in the USA. 221 yards to 50 grams and 9 stitches per inch on a US 1, 7 stitches per inch on a US 3, and I am off to swatch.
And let me just grab that to show you because I've actually made some progress on this. So this is the main color, and then you can see there are these contrasting colors. My light isn't exactly picking it up. This is kind of a teal color. I think it's maybe reading a little bit more navy, but it has quite a bit of green in it. This is a pale blue, and what you're looking at is the sleeve. So this particular pattern has a very boxy 1940s shoulder. The pattern calls for knitting a tab with double the weight of yarn. So that's what this little square is. It's very thick, double weight. I decided my approach to knitting this was because, let me back up a little and tell you a little about this project. We're merging 2 patterns. So I'm using the pattern for a different sweater, the instructions for a different sweater that had solid color blocks like checkerboard. And I'm superimposing these triangles onto that pattern. So in other words, I don't really have a pattern that's going to tell me how to do what I'm trying to do. I had to improvise. And although I swatched, I wasn't really sure until I started to knit how my row gauge would be. My stitch gauge, I pretty much had a handle on, but the row gauge, especially with doing this in Tarja, I really wanted to see it play out. So what I decided to do was to start knitting. This is my cast on. I started knitting at the shoulder, and I will knit down until my sleeve is long enough. And I'm pretty sure, because I did some calculations before I began to knit. I'm pretty sure that I'll be at the end of one of these triangle motifs. And if I'm not, I'll just do a few rows of the main color. But I think I'm in good shape here. I did want to show you the bobbins that I use. I've had these bobbins for probably 40 years. And when you're working on intarsia, it's really great to have these. As I'm showing you, they're all tangled up, but it does generally keep your yarn from getting too tangled up. I mean, I have 4 things going here. I have the main color on the left side, the main color on the right side, and then these 2 colors. So if I didn't have some kind of a management system, these would all be tangled up and in a big mess every time. But it's not that hard to just, swing it around. It's never that bad, because you can take this and you can shorten it. You can just wrap it around and get this to be so close to your knitting that it can't reach to tangle. So those are a kind of nifty thing to have. I'll look and see if I can find them online, and I'll put a link down below if I succeed in finding them. This is the back of my knitting. I just wanted to show you. Unlike Fair Isle, I'm not carrying floats along. I'm only carrying floats at the very, very top when I have to get my main color yarn from over here back to here to start doing this. So you can actually see that little float going there, but it keeps this a single thickness. It's not double weight. And I'm on a size 3 needle, where I'm getting just shy of 7 stitches per inch, which is what they told me I was going to get. So hooray for that. Yeah, I wanted to show you the handbag. Thank you to those of you who have been watching my podcast for a while. If you're one of those people who's a returning viewer, you will have seen that I was trying to match yarn to the colors of this handbag. And it's hard to do online, without seeing the colors in person. But even though they're not exact, I want to carry this handbag with this. Even though they're not exact, I think, the sweater will be up here, the handbag will be down by my knees. I think it should be pretty good. What I didn't say is, if you haven't seen it before, the front of the sweater, no, they'll go in the opposite direction. They go upside down. The front of the sweater will have the triangles going down like this. And I wanted to talk about how I'm planning to finesse that too, because remember, the pattern I'm using is not the pattern. It's, a mashup. So I had to figure out on my own how I was going to do that. And just like I decided to start the sleeves from the shoulder and work down, I decided to do the neckline and work down as well. I wanted to make sure that I got that top triangle positioned starting here and not being chopped off in the middle. And I was afraid if I started at the bottom that I might get to a strange location to give me the right length. Not so precise with the row gauge. And often with me, because I'm a little bit hippie, I really can't tell how long I want a sweater to be. Every fabric is different. This fabric is stiffer than I was imagining. And I did wash my swatch, so I know it's going to soften up a little bit. But I think when this hits me around the hips, it's going to be standing out a little bit. And I really need to see that on me before I will be able to decide just how long I want it to be. So my best bet for all of those reasons is to start here and work down. This area of the sweater is the part that people see most. You can't see right now what is below my bust. So it was very important for me to work on this area, the shoulders and the neckline, before I proceeded to knit down and complete the sweater. So think of it this way. You know, when I was a kid and I would come home from school and I had a lot of homework to do, the temptation is, I've had a long day, I want to take a break, have a snack, maybe watch some TV. But I tried to condition myself to get the hard stuff out of the way, and then I could be on easy street. So I would come home, do my homework, and then yak on the phone with my friends or go over a friend's house or whatever. So I think this is the same thing. I want to get the difficult work squared away, and then I can sort of relax. I don't think the sweater is going to be so easy for me because I'm going to try and tailor it to fit the way I would like my sweater to fit. And I have the measurement of those triangles to constantly contend with. So this is a story that will be continued. I cast on for both shoulders separately, right here, and another panel right here. And I knit both of those down at the same time so that I could do my mirrored increases, make one left, make one right, concurrently. I wanted to make sure I had the exact same number of rows and the exact same number of increases around the neckline. And when I got the neckline to be long enough so that I would have enough space to get this over my head, I cast on stitches to go in between, and then I continued back and forth to connect them. So that's all I've done of the front so far. But again, I wanted to make sure that the opening was going to be large enough, and the only way I could really know that is if I went to the back. So I don't have a lot of these end pieces to put on my chalgu cords. So what I did was, the cord is still in here. That's why you see it being rigid. I took a stitch marker and I just looped it through the hole, and that's preventing this from sliding off. So that's a little tip for people who might use chalgus. Then I put another cord in, and I picked up the stitches along the shoulder, and it's so neat inside, and that's my shoulder seam. And then I just knit down the back this much, like an inch. Again, two separate pieces, increasing as I went, just a little bit. It's going to be higher in the back than it is in the front. And when I got down to that point where I thought I had a big enough opening, I cast on stitches to connect the two, and I'll continue there as well, knitting down. Pretty soon, going back to the front, pretty soon I will want to start my first triangle, but I didn't want to do this until I was, until I made more progress on the sleeve. I think that I'll finish the sleeve and then I'll come back. Now I really have a good sampling here of how big the triangles are. So I'm pretty sure I know how many I need for the length of my sweater. But I don't want the triangle to start right up here. There is going to be a little bit of ribbing. So I'm probably going to knit down a little bit and start my first triangle. Yeah, so I think that's probably enough about Harlequin for now. I did mention the next knit along, and I have not yet divulged what it's going to be. I think I want to keep it a surprise, and I was going to just drop little hints here and there. I've already dropped a couple of hints But for this episode, I will tell you, it's two colors. It's not intarsia, it's not Fair Isle, although it could be done as intarsia, which is probably what I will do, but it is two colors. So start to think about if you want to do a two-color sweater, and I'll give you more hints as we get closer to our start date of January 15th. There's one main color, and then the other color is a little bit of an accent. I will put a link in the show notes of where you can go if you're interested in signing up for that. It's a little bit of a leap of faith, but you've seen the couple of other things that I've done, and it will be something very smart, and maybe you can put your trust in me. Hell, people trust Stephen West all the time. Not that I'm in that league, but it's an existing pattern. It's a vintage pattern. So you can't go wrong. Let me take a moment here to say, if you're enjoying this podcast, and if you've been enjoying my prior podcasts, I would be most appreciative if you would consider supporting the channel. I've given a couple of links in the show notes where you can do that. I do have some administrative costs associated with keeping up with this, and that would just help me defray some of my expenses. I'll say thank you in advance. In the last episode, I talked about the spreadsheet that I had generated to try and guesstimate how much yarn I was going to need. And I kept thinking to myself, somewhere there must be a chart on somebody's website that, or maybe on Ravelry, that would show you for different size sweaters, maybe different weights of yarn, what a typical amount of yarn would be in various weights. So I looked around, I couldn't find anything like that. And when you know it, as soon as I ordered my yarn, I found that Lion Brand had a chart. It's not exactly what I was looking for, but I'll insert a picture of that chart here. They do show you the different weights of yarn, and then they say for an adult sweater, how much yardage you would need. Now, they don't have the sweater size. You're going to need a lot less yarn if you're an extra small as opposed to 3X. But I don't know. I don't really like their number. I think it seems a little high. So if any of you know of a good source for information like that, please put it in the comments. That would be a great thing to share with other knitters. I know that many of the people who watch this podcast are vintage lovers and wax nostalgic. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that 88 years ago, on December 5th, Prohibition was repealed in the United States. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president at the time, signed into law a measure to legalize beer and wine, which led to the full-fledged repeal. December 5th, 1933. From New York to California, atmospheric restaurants and cocktail lounges sprung up as revelers rushed to enjoy vintage cocktail favorites or newfangled concoctions. Fun seekers enjoyed fantastic floor shows, musical ensembles, and exotic environments. And a newly liberated America couldn't get enough. I've mentioned before that it's easier for me to build my wardrobe around my accessories. It's so much easier to buy a pair of shoes that fit or a handbag and then try and match yarns to that. So in my acquisitions section, I wanted to share with you these brand new shoes that just arrived today. They're from a company called Memery, Memery. I'll give a link. She does reproductions of vintage shoes. So these are looking like they're a little purple, but in reality, they're kind of like a chocolate brown. And there's a like plaid stitching in celery green, red, and pale yellow. And I will probably do at some point that Lynx and Rink sweater to go with these. I'll probably do something in these colors. It's a 3-color sweater, so I have 3 colors I could choose from here. I have a wide foot. It's really hard for me to find shoes, even contemporary shoes that fit. So to have found a designer who's doing vintage reproductions, some of her designs, not all of them, she does in wide. I'm so excited. Plus, it's all leather. It's a leather sole. The inside is all leather too. I'm ecstatic. You can't even believe I'm over the moon. Each shoe was shipped in a nice little sack to protect it. And she actually sent extra, I don't know what you call these, the lift, so that if you ever need to replace this, you have the exact right shape and thickness. Really like great company out of Denmark. But the shipping wasn't outrageously expensive. And hey, for me to have something that fits, is comfortable, is all leather, and at a decent price, I was just thrilled. In addition to circling your calendars for the January 15th kickoff of the next knit-along, I want you to circle your calendars also for December 15th, which is in the not too distant future, when some of my guests will be returning to do our 2nd annual holiday chat. These are all vintage knitters, and they're from all over the world, and they'll be showing the projects that they're currently working on. And it's a lovely group of women. So far, no men, just women. Although I'd love to have some male vintage knitters if they're out there. So I hope you'll join me for that. Should be a lot of fun. And we'll be live. I will try and be live. So if people want to interact with us in the little chat, you'll be able to do that. Okay, I think I've rambled enough for this episode. I might have a couple other little things that I'll sprinkle in here, but that's a wrap. I will see you next time. Toodaloo. What has arrived in the mail this week but the buttons for my Jeannie? And I'm going to do this on screen so that you can share in the excitement. It is completely sealed. I haven't opened it yet. Let me grab my mother's vintage scissors. These are the scissors I know from my youth, from my earliest recollections. And oh boy, I hope I'm going to like these. Please, I will put in the show notes the website for where I got them. Well, I might not even have to do that because they put their card inside. Let's see if I can get this to focus. It says Brizzle buttons, all kinds of fabulous vintage sewing and knitting buttons. brizzlebuttons.etsy.com. And they wrap these up in a pretty little package that matches my sweater. I guess they knew from the color of the buttons what my project was. So let's see. I hope that they are pretty. I really wanted mother of pearl, but until I find authentic mother of pearl, one just fell out. Oh, maybe they gave me an extra one. Let's see, I need 8 for my Jeannie, and they are adorable. Well, that is about as good as I can get it to be. So let me hold these up. They gave me a bunch of them. I guess I ordered the smallest quantity that they had. So I only needed 8. It looks like I have a lot. If anybody needs any, hit me up. Can I hold this? I think it's going to be just great, and I have plenty of them. The pattern shows 4. I'll see if I can fit more than 4 because I have a whole bag full of buttons, but that's it. And now you are seeing my FO happy dance. Yay! Woo! 4 months of my life. Actually, I calculated 16, 18 weeks. So really a full 4.5 months. And I haven't included the length of time that's gonna take me to attach the buttons. And I still have some ends to weave in. Not too much though. I was trying to weave them in as I went. So I'm also going to do a little unboxing of my yarn, which should arrive momentarily. So I'll be back with that. I might be in a different sweater because it might be a different day, but if it's today, you might see me again. I forgot to tell you about my necklace. This necklace is made of rubber, and all of these faux jewels are placed in the rubber while it's still molten. This was made in Paris in the 1980s, as were the earrings. They're rubber too. So even though they look like they're really heavy and breakable, they're not. They would practically bounce. So instead of the necklace I usually wear with this sweater, I thought I would bling it up a little bit for you today. I think I've shown this sweater before. It's a sweater I knit in the 1980s, and this was my first color work, if you can call it that, a little intarsia. I did have some bobbins, which I still have and will be using in the Harlequin upcoming. This was Angora. This stuff was very expensive. I don't see anybody using it anymore, but a small ball back in the 80s, so 40 years ago, was maybe like $5 or $10, but it was a wee little bit of a thing. Okay, so I wanted to show you my latest whip. This is one of the 9 colors from Jeannie. I still have a lot of each of the colors left, and I'm trying to think of things I can do to use that yarn up. So I wanted to make a hat. I had started making a beret, and I thought I didn't want to do this whole Fair Isle thing. I'm tired of doing this after so many months, but I do want something that will coordinate with this. So I picked one of the colors, and I'll probably introduce one of these lighter colors like the pink so that it ties in, because I think if it was all green, it might not be the best. And I'm varying from my usual beret to make something that's a little bit like an academic mortarboard. It's from a vintage pattern. So that's the hat. I have no idea if I'm getting the right gauge because they really didn't specify how many stitches per inch. And I forget what size needle I'm on. I know it's not a teensy size. The pattern called for size 8, which I think is an old British size, and I believe that that's comparable to a US 5 today, which this may be, I'm not sure. And I'm using this yarn triple. So how do I get from a single strand to triple? Well, there's something called Navajo knitting, which means that, well, there's a whole setup, but at some point you get to having a loop and then your individual strand. And what you do is you pull this strand through the loop. I don't know if you can see me doing that. And then you just keep pulling it through, and these 3 become your next strand. And I can make this longer. And when I'm knitting and I get to, once again, to the bottom of this loop, I just pull this through and make myself a new 3 strand. So I'm doing this in that method. So it's 3 strands of the same color, which actually might be interesting for me to blend this with another color. I hadn't thought about that until just now, but we'll see. I have no idea if this is going to come out to be a size that fits my head. And it's hard to figure out what's going on here. There are decreases on both sides of the straight panel. So it's kind of forming something that I'm thinking might circle back on itself. It's not knit in the round, but I think if I keep going, this might become a center point and it will have something radiating out from it. I'm not sure. And it's hard for me to tell from just reading the directions. So this is to be continued.